All right. Okay, let's get started with day two of Crio Winter of Doing. Hopefully, I'm audible on the YouTube stream. Today, we are going to start with rest session. All right. If you have not joined our Telegram channel or the Slack workspace, it seems like some of you had some issues with joining the Slack workspace. Join the Telegram channel and also maybe ping us over email. We'll be able to sort it out. All right. That's where we post all our updates. So please make sure that you are kind of in these channels. All right. Let's quickly see. So yesterday we started with the kickoff session, and then we continue with the flawless HTTP session, right? Hopefully you saw the part two of the video where we have actually resolved the problem, whatever we faced, and we just like did a redo of the video. And today we want to start off with the REST API. The goal for you is to hopefully you've completed the HTTP byte already. If not, it's actually a good chance for you to combine HTTP byte as well as REST byte and then finish it today. What I'm going to do today is to quickly give you a glance of what is REST API, right? You already know how to go into Chrome developer tools, kind of look at what's happening from your browser. So we just like take that one step further. All right. Okay. So some of you, it seems like yesterday, given that you had some issues getting started, or maybe you missed the Slack notification, it's not too late. If you just like start off with the relevant recordings that we have shared over the Slack channel as well as the Telegram channel, you should be able to get started in, like, say 1-2 hours max. All right. And you should be able to complete the HTTP byte as well and the REST API right today. Okay. So feel free to ping us if you have any issues. Few community guidelines, it's extremely kind of like overflowing with a lot of messages, right? The Slack channel, that's amazing to see, right? The kind of energy that's out there, we're kind of like getting overwhelmed, right? Like a lot of community advocates and a lot of your peers helping each other out. That's really, really amazing, right? Continue doing that. Just like some ground rules. If you're facing any platform issues, please post it on this bit.ly link. Again, it's shared on your announcements channel. That way we know what is a system issue, whether or it's a conceptual understanding which your peers can solve. Sometimes you're kind of blocked on logging in or unlocking the byte, etc. Please do let us know. We are kind of trying to make sure that you have a great experience. All right. The next thing is use the appropriate channels in Slack. There's one channel created for each of the bytes you are doing, like byte HTTP, byte REST, byte Linux, byte AWS, byte Git, right? So please make sure that you post on the respective Slack channels. That becomes very easy for us to actually keep a track on. And also the people who are kind of completed things, you can always pay attention to the Slack channels and then help each other out. Okay, seems like most parts you are already doing that, so really awesome there, and then please continue doing so. The other thing is, in Slack there is a feature called thread where you start off a conversation and then reply within the thread. Okay, instead of typing multiple messages, if you can limit whatever problem you have into a thread, that is much easier to resolve as well. Again, something very nuanced. If you're not used to Slack, totally understand, you may type multiple messages, but it becomes very easy to resolve a thread rather than a bunch of messages. All right. So some of you seem to be making very good progress. Spend more time with curious cat questions. Try answering them yourselves, right? And there are a lot of reading resources given. Go through them, right? It's an excellent opportunity for you to actually learn quite a bit, right? And given that with Chrome developer tools, I already see people kind of trying out various sorts of things and asking questions. Really a big thumbs up. Continue doing that. Also, a lot of peer help is happening, right? That's actually the way to learn. Okay, so when you see, if when you learn for the first time, you might not have internalization, but as soon as you start doing things, your internalization definitely goes a notch up. But as soon as you start helping your peers answering their questions, it just like goes to a very different level. They might sometimes ask you questions that you might have never thought of. That way you start thinking, okay, hey, did I understand that right? Maybe he's actually bringing a different perspective, right? Suddenly your understanding goes to a great extent. All right. And as you follow, we'll definitely be awarding you badges as well as you help your fellow peers learn things as well. Now, what did you understand yesterday, right? Based on the HTTP byte, did you understand What happens if you upload, let's say, your picture to Instagram profile? Is it going to be a get request, or is it going to be a put request, or is it going to be a post request? Right? Can you actually answer this without actually going and trying things out, and then you can go and cross verify? All right, try it out, right? And I think some of you have already shared the answers on Slack. Try it out, okay? And you can also try it out on other sites as well, right? Try doing it on Twitter, right? See if there is any difference. Okay, there may be differences, by the way, right? Next thing, what happens when you visit, say, Akshay Kumar's profile? Seems like he has a significant number of followers, 47 million, not bad. What kind of HTTP request do you think would be made to fetch his latest photo? I think it's a straightforward answer, but go check it out. Next one. What if you enter the wrong password while logging into your Insta account? What status code would you be expecting back? Right? You know what is a client error, what is a server error, what is a redirect. I'm guessing you would be able to make a guess, but go try it out. All right. Now, today, I'd like to start off with what is REST API. Fairly simple concept, but before getting in there, let's see how many mobile apps do you have on your phone. Why don't you take say a few seconds and then count them? Just going to give you a pause, maybe a 10-second pause. How many mobile apps do you have on your phone? Maybe 10, 20, 30. I'm guessing there's going to be a inverse correlation between your age and mobile apps. If you were to take my phone, not really too many apps, but if you're taking somebody slightly younger, I'm going to guess that they're going to have more than 100 apps on their phone, right? Now, have you ever wondered, you are using these day to day, right? So many times, I mean, you're kind of like sleeping with phone, eating with phone. Have you ever wondered how these apps communicate with the backend servers, right? You open Uber, Swiggy, any app, right? It has to talk to some server, correct? How does that whole communication happen? Based on what you did yesterday with HTTP, can you actually make a guess, right? Next, I'm very sure all of you would have used Google Maps, right? And inside Google Maps, when you try to get directions, right? Sometimes there is a hailing a cab option. Okay, it doesn't appear in all the cities, but in some of the cities, you'll have hailing the cab as an option, right? Now, it shows up Ola fare or Uber fare or whatever provider you have in your city, correct? And the question is, how is it that Google Maps is able to show the pricing from Ola or Uber, right? And by the way, it's not a static fare. It's not going to say, okay, hey, from here to there, it's about 2 kilometers or 4 kilometers. I'm going to multiply that with a fixed number and then show you the fare. If there is surge pricing, Google Maps will also reflect that surge pricing, right? And of course, if you were to think about it, Ola or Uber is not going to share their code, right? They're not going to share their code with Google Maps so that they can actually get this fare. So how is that happening today, right? Think about these curious cat questions and one more. I'm very sure that you're all on multiple social apps, Twitter, Insta, whatever, Snapchat, right? And most of them have multiple clients, right? You could access them from, say, Android device, iOS device, or from your website as well, right? Now, each of them are using different languages as well, right? If you were to see, iOS is using Swift, Android is using Java, and then the web app is going to probably use JavaScript. Now, all of them are talking to the backend. Let's consider this as Twitter. And is Twitter going to maintain different code bases to serve each of these clients? Right? So each of them is written in different language, correct? The clients, mobile clients and the web clients. Do you think that Twitter is going to maintain different code bases? That doesn't sound right. Though you might think, okay, yeah, maybe because they're in different languages, they're rendering things in a different way, right? This is rendering in a different way. This is rendering the UI in a different way, right? You might think, okay, hey, it doesn't sound right, but I don't know how it is happening as well, right? The answer to all these questions will be, is REST API. Okay, as soon as you're done with the REST API byte, you'll have very good answers and clarity about all these questions. All right, we'll get started. So, what is REST API? Let's split it up. Start with API. API is just a piece of software, okay, or rather, sorry, a way for one piece of software to talk to another, right? If you have two programs and then you want to use some function from one program in the other program, then you call the other one as an API. Okay, you can think of all the libraries that you are used to, right? Let's say I have to read a file, write a file. There are, let's say, 5 to 6 functions. You can say that they're all part of one API. Okay, all the file handling API. Another example, let's say that I want to just like simplify things a bit. Okay, let's I'm not going to go into the theoretical definition of some of these. Instead, we'll just like make it slightly more practical to understand. Let's say that I write a function, okay, which is prime. Okay, it accepts an integer, okay, and then it returns a boolean as output. Any language is fine, right? All I give you is, hey, here is a function. It's called is prime. It accepts an integer and then returns a boolean. Now you can use it in any part of your code, okay. And whenever you call this function, I'm going to return back the whether or not the number you gave me is prime or not. Correct? This particular line alone, right, is called a contract or an API, right, or a function declaration, right? Now, what does it say? It doesn't talk about implementation. Right? As soon as I give you this particular API, you don't really care how I'm going to write the isPrime program. Correct? I may actually have a very, very dumb implementation for it. That is immaterial to you. Correct? As long as I serve the contract that if you call is prime with an integer, you're going to get the answer on whether or not it's going to be a prime number. Right? If a bunch of such function declarations are combined, you call that as an API. As simple as that. Nothing more. Right? Now, let's move on to the next step. What is a REST API? REST is essentially an architectural style, or you can think of it as a standard that has a certain set of rules. And any API that conforms to those rules is called a REST API. Okay, now that might sound a bit vague, right? Like it's a bit of too theoretical definition. For the purposes of this discussion, we are not going to go into the conformance part of it. Okay, you can go to Wikipedia, check this out as to what are these rules, and then what do you call as a REST API, and when does it not should not be called as a REST API. But the conventional use of a REST API term is slightly different. Okay, this standard was around 2000 they started, right? And internet has evolved quite a bit from there, right? You wouldn't even have dreamt that there are going to be mobile phones, apps that are going to talk to the backend servers, etc. Right? So this is, there is a theoretical aspect to it, and then what happens in reality is slightly different. Today, if you're kind of like talking about REST API in say job descriptions, or whenever somebody asks you, hey, can you actually write REST API, right? The expectation is slightly different. All they are talking about is REST over HTTP. That's it, right? If your browser or your app is going to talk to the backend server over HTTP, then most often than not, you call that as a REST API. Though technically, some of what the companies call as a REST API may not even conform to the REST architectural style. Okay, so there is some usage, conventional usage versus the theoretical aspect of what is the architecture. See, all right. So we are going to stick to this definition to make sure that your understanding is slightly more easier. All right. Now, let's see. Yesterday, we actually visited the Crio website, right? And we opened the Chrome developer tools. I'm going to reload this page again. Going to repeat the same experiment. Okay. Now, by now, you are very clear that when the page gets loaded, right? When the Crio page gets loaded, it's actually a HTTPS request. It's a GET request, got a successful status code of 200 back, it's talking to the remote IP address, all good. Okay. It is talking to some URL end of day, correct? Some endpoint, it can be anything. If you come down, what you are getting back is HTML. Okay. And if you were to look into it, right, you can actually see whatever content appears on the site is also going to be there on the HTML response, correct? So if you were to see the response, right, it's kind of unstructured. You call HTML response as unstructured. Okay, let's say I want to search for this particular testimonial in the page. Okay, I should be able to find it. It was a wonderful journey, right? I'm able to find whatever text appears on the home page over here in the HTML response, correct? Now, I'm going to quickly come back over here. So this is what happened. And then this is kind of the response that we got from the site, right? If you were to see the amount of structure, right? The HTML response back to you is kind of like nested. And it's not even kind of something that you can understand, right? As a human being, when you see things being rendered in the browser, it seems like fairly clean, correct? But the HTML content is not structured for you to understand completely, right? You have to rely on other cues to make sense out of this data, right? Now, let's say hypothetically, okay, Crio launches a mobile app, all right, and we want to have a tab there, right, just like all the other apps, where only the testimonials show up. Okay, let's imagine that all of you are so happy with Cryo Winter doing that, you want to just like go and then blast it out, right? And then we bring all those testimonials into the app. Now, the question I have is, can we use the same endpoint Cryo.do, which was returning HTML file, right? Which also had the testimonials to actually power this app? Simple question, right? So you have this response, which is a HTML response, and we want to create this app and then want to show all the testimonials. The rendering, of course, will be different, right? It will not be same as desktop, but we want to show it in a different tab. We calling https www.creo.do and then getting the HTML data and then parsing this whole HTML to get the testimonials. Is that the right way to even think of this problem? Right? There must be something better than that. I'll tell you why. Now, there's very important thing over here. If you understand this concept, REST API understanding is done. All right, let's see. There is something called unstructured versus structured data. Okay, I'll quickly move back and forth a bit. Okay, if you had to go here on the Crio platform, okay, somewhere down below, you should be able to see the companies, the developers that we have worked with, right? Now, let's say that I'm just like going to use this point as a reference. Of course, you'll be able to find that over here as well, right? If I were to search for say Flipkart, I would be able to see that over here, right? Now, I'm going to get back here. I want to quickly ask you a simple question, a very simple activity. Okay, this is the page, just like a screenshot there. Let's say that Creo wants to add the address of each of these companies as well in the web page, right? In our web page, we want to add the address of each of these companies we have worked with. Okay, can you tell me from this particular image, right, or it shows up on the website as to whether this is Flipkart's address or this is Flipkart's address? It's slightly tricky, right? You could have either design. Maybe this address is associated with Flipkart, or maybe this address is associated with Flipkart, right? Either design is totally possible because visually you can have anything on your UI, right? Whatever pleases the eye. Let's say we move the things a bit. Okay, the individual components are moved slightly away from each other. Now, will you be, as a human being, will you be able to tell which is Flipkart's address and which is Visa's address? Most likely you'd be, right? You'd be clearly able to say, hey, okay, you know what? This comes closer to Flipkart, so I'm going to call this as Flipkart's address. This address is closer to Visa, so I'm going to call this as Visa address. So if we were to put this on our site, then you would be able to say, okay, hey, this address is closer to the logo. I'm going to call that as Visa or Flipkart's address, right? Now, can the computer do this? Right? With a HTML response, where you're just like aligning the spaces here and there, etc., right? You're just like changing the styling over here, correct? For computers or any program, in the sense a program cannot actually comprehend this, right? You are used to the worldly knowledge that if Crio has a reasonably good designer, right, they're going to do this way, right? And most likely they're not going to associate Flipkart with this address and this with this address, right? It's common sense and worldly knowledge, but that is something that is missing in the computers, correct? Which means for computers everything has to be very very precise. With HTML response, where this based on space etc., it might not be able to say what is what, right? In this case you need to have structured data. All right, here usually on web we use JSON for sending and returning back structured data. The same thing that you saw in the previous page, if it is a JSON, which is essentially a key value pair, right? It says company is Flipkart, addresses so and so, company is Visa, addresses so and so, right? Now, if this kind of structured data is given back by the Crio server, it is totally possible for your program to understand which is whose address, correct? In HTML, it was very hard, but with JSON or any form of structured data, it could be XML or anything else, it becomes very, very precise for the computer to say what is what, all right? Let's try to understand this with an example. Okay, I'm again going to the Crio site. This is the logged in experience. I'm hoping you have already seen this, right? I'm going to quickly go to the network tab and then reload this page. Right, I'm going to go to the bytes tab. You can see that there are some bytes that got listed over here. I'm going to find out which particular byte or which particular API response got this data. It was pure luck. I might have tried like few of these API calls. I'm going to lock in on the one that is actually appearing over here. Right? These are different API requests or HTTP requests. Let's see. Okay, I've clicked on one of the APIs, okay, or HTTP request. Let's see what it has. It also calls some endpoint, right? HTTPS consumer something, right? End of day, this is no different from the endpoint you have over here, correct? It's no different actually, right? The server can decide to return the other value over here as well. Okay, so it's totally possible. It's like how you configured your server. All right. So there is some endpoint or URL that we are hitting, the browser is hitting, correct? It's a HTTPS request. It's no different from that. It's a GET request, right? You must have already learned about post, put, etc. Right? This is a GET request, meaning I'm getting some value back. It was successful. Now the difference comes over here. Over here, it says the content type that got returned back is JSON, right? Earlier we got HTML and then now we are getting, if you can see over here, this was HTML and then over here it is JSON, correct? Now let's go to the response. It is giving us some JSON response. I'm going to go to the preview tab and then see what we got back. All right, you can see that it is returning back a bunch of JSON, right? It's an essentially a JSON array. If you have the square bracket, it means that it's a JSON array. Okay, and each of the elements in the array you can see corresponds to some byte over here, right? The first one says Spring Boot, second one says Jackson, third one says Lombok, right? So there is some sort of a one-on-one correspondence between what appears over here versus what is over here, right? Let's click on one of them and then see what is over inside the JSON, right? So there are several keys, several values as well. If I were to ask you, okay, what is the duration of Spring Boot byte? Can you tell me by looking at this data? I'm going to pause for 10 seconds. Can you tell me what is the duration of the Spring Boot byte? Right? So if you were to simply go through all the things, you would find that there is a duration which says 2 hours, right? Now, let's try one more. In the Jackson byte, can you tell me what skill sets a person who completes this byte would pick up? Again, few seconds break. Take a look at it. All right. I'm very sure you would have been able to find that out by looking at the ME skills. Correct? As a human being, you are able to say, okay, hey, if it is something around the duration, I'm going to look at this field. If it is skill set, I'm going to look at this field. Now, can you write a program which does the same? Right? So you write a program where, let's say, I'm going to ask you to list all the bytes that are free. Okay. So what you're going to do, let's say we are writing the program in Python. You're going to look for where the price is listed. Okay. There is this field called ME base price. I'm going to get the response back from the API. Correct. And inside the API, there is this key value pair or array of key value pairs. And in one of the JSON object, you have each JSON object contains the ME base price as the key. Correct? So in Python, you write something, you can write a parser, or there are default JSON parsers available. Okay. Either way, you know string parsing, end of day, right? You look for this word ME base price and then you pick the key. If it is 0, you're going to say that as a free byte. If it has some pricing, you're going to say that it's going to be charged. Correct? So you can write a Python program, you can write a Java program. If suppose tomorrow you want to send this to the Android app, the Android app also can call this particular API or the HTTPS endpoint, get the data back, and then put a say token sticker over here saying free or price something, right? Android app can also do that because it is simple JSON key value pair. If you're using iOS app, let's say we launch iOS app, the iOS app also can do the same thing. Correct? Which means by using structured data, you are enabling your program to consume the data and then make sense out of that. Right? Unlike HTML data, where you need that extra worldly knowledge or which is called semantic data. Right? It doesn't have that, right? Like unless you know about the worldly things, you can't interpret this data, right? The HTML data. But over here, it's very cleanly structured, which means that you can understand the programs or any software that you write can also understand this. And one of the most common form of structured data that gets exchanged throughout the internet is JSON, right? There are several reasons. JavaScript is extremely powerful in processing JSON. It just like processes natively very, very fast. So that's actually one of the reasons why everybody uses JSON. All right. And almost every single language will also have a very solid uh, library to parse JSON, right? Other forms of structured data, you could think of, say, XML, right? Slightly more time consuming for parsing as well as in terms of space. There are other things like protobuf, thrift, avro, right? There are several different structured data formats, but predominantly on internet, you will see JSON getting used, both the communication between your mobile app and the backend, as well as websites to the backend. All right. Hope that was clear. Let's actually get back. And one more thing I want to highlight is this request response is no different from the other request response, right? It's the same get, HTTPS, all the other things remain the same except for the response type, correct? Which means the REST API over here is also a HTTP request, correct? Not the other way around. Not every HTTP request is a REST API, but converse is true. Again, I'm simplifying the definition of REST API a bit, but in the sense what we are actually looking at, it is actually true. All the REST APIs are mostly going to be HTTP requests as well. All right, let's get back and wrap it up. So as long as you understand this difference between structured data and unstructured data, anytime your API or the endpoint sends back structured data, you're going to call that as a REST API because that can be used in several different ways, right? It doesn't carry all the styling, all those things into picture. It just like returns data alone. right? That can be understood by another program. All right. So this is what we saw. The content type is what makes a difference, right? You're able to answer questions, and so is the computer, right? Which means a mobile app can easily use this and then build anything on top of it. Okay, any client can consume this data. Browser, Android, iOS, it is immaterial. All right. Now, this is what you are going to learn in the REST byte as well. As you go through the byte, you will be able to play around with different things to get a solid understanding of REST API. Okay, you're going to start off by playing around with a simple weather API. From there, you're going to dissect a simple weather API and then understand, right, that end of day, a REST API is no different from a simple HTTP request response. All right, you'll be able to see every individual field of it mimicking what you saw yesterday, no different. And the more important thing, why do you have APIs? Because there is a preset contract which can be used by your programs, correct? So you're going to call this weather API from different languages like Python, Java. You could play around, do more as well, right? Based on whatever language you know, you can actually call it from other languages as well. Finally, the post on LinkedIn exercise that some of you have tried yesterday is actually one of the tasks in Respite. Okay, where you're going to go to your browser, post something on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, wherever you want, copy the API that or the REST API that your browser is sending, copy a curl command, paste it on the terminal, and then you are there. Okay, we'll see if you are going to flood the internet with your learning. All right, does that sound exciting? How are you guys enjoying the learn by doing so far? Okay, coming week is going to be even more exciting. Starting tomorrow, we are going to have Binny Bansal, the co-founder of Flipkart, right? One of the largest exits in India, right? He's going to have a conversation with you folks. There's this bit.ly link where you can ask your questions for Binny, right? And tomorrow, Ajay will be hosting Binny. All right, it's at 6 o'clock. We'll be sharing all the details on Slack as well as Telegram. So if you're not there, please make sure that you are on both the channels, right? So that you don't get missed out. Okay. One more thing. I think some of you have already sent emails asking us, okay, hey, you know what? I love the journey. How do I go about sharing my learning? Right. And we saw some very interesting snippets also in the Slack channels where I think I forgot the exact sequence, but somebody was asking if I post my password is visible on the Chrome tab, what do I do? Right? Is it a security issue? And so there were like different kinds and things around redirects. I type say Crio.do and then I don't see 200 as the status. Instead, I saw something like say 301 or 302. What's exactly happening? Right? These are all for you to learn and then experiment with. Right? Now, here we have a great way for you to share that joy with the world as well. You can start creating a blog, right? And then slowly start documenting your journey, right? There's like all the how do you go about structuring, etc. There's some guidelines that we have shared over here. Learn throughout this week, start putting them into sort of some sort of a material, share your experience with the world, and then you're also will be eligible for some goodies as well. All right. So all the details again will be shared on the Slack channel. So get started right away. Okay. Especially if you're kind of helping your peers with some interesting questions, or you see your peers asking some very interesting questions outside of the byte content as well, that would be amazing to add to your blog. Right. Show them that you have helped your peers. That's an awesome thing, right? And which actually starts putting you in a direction where you will learn more and more. Right. That's about it. See you all tomorrow at 6 p.m. And hopefully, if you have not completed the HTTP byte, you get started. Feel free to let us know wherever you have issues. We'll be able to get on top of it and then solve it for you right away. And then also finish the REST byte. It's going to be even more fun. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And enjoy your rest of the weekend, whatever few hours is left by doing the REST byte. Okay. Thank you so much then. Bye, guys.